Hello world, it's me, Dennis. On part two of my reasonably spontaneous conversation with Sue Gordon, we pick up Sue's story as she ascends in the CIA. In addition to all her roles and responsibilities, she and her husband Jim decide it's time to start a family.
My son was born 5 years in. He's my older. Just what a great man. Best heart ever. He's also really smart, but he's got the best heart. And then my daughter was born almost 4 years later. She's magical. I don't know. My older sister wanted to be a mom since the time she had me. And I never I never babysat a lot. It was never the thing I wanted to do. In fact, my friends, when I got pregnant the first time, they're like, I don't know, Sue, I don't know if we can see you as a mom. Like, what? Anyway, best thing ever, made me better at everything. Challenged me to be, because I'm an in or out gal, so there's no I'm going to be half good at work and half good as a mom. No, so I had to cheat time a bit to be as good as I wanted to be at both, but it's so balancing. They're so amazing. Man, you end up having to make choices though. I left for 8 years because the day came when I realized I couldn't be as good a mom as I wanted to be and be as good at work. And so I chose the right thing. And I spent 8 years in the middle of my career being a full-time mom.
What was that like? Give me all right, tell me the story. That is fascinating. All right, so here you're rising, you're moving in the CIA. So then you say, okay, so all right, I'm imagining Donna Reed, right? I mean, here we are with that. No, but give me the picture.
Okay, so you're right. I moved up quick. So I become a senior in 1995 at the age of in my mid 30s, which is pretty unusual. And then 3 years later, after I had launched a group of private citizens to form a company called In-Q-Tel, just things unfolded at home that I'm like, ooh, I'm not being a great mom here. And I don't know how to be a great mom without committing to it. And so with 2 weeks notice, I left and I resigned. They offered me part-time jobs that would never work for me. They offered me jobs that didn't mean anything, that would just piss me off, because I never hated the time I was away from home, because I was always doing something valuable. But I knew it was time away from home. If I were doing stupid work, oh, well, I'd resent the heck out of that. So I left with 2 weeks notice. Imagine my children's joy to have all this come home and say, hey, I'm home, let's achieve. Yeah, absolutely not. They're like, what are you doing?
Wait a minute.
It's all fun and games till this bundle of energy now has nothing to focus on but her 14 and 11-year-old. That was just great for them. But it was I loved my job. So leaving it was both so simple to do and so scary to do. I was afraid I wouldn't be cool anymore. I thought that I was cool because of the work I did. And that I'd somehow be only or just or something. And what I learned is that's just not true. You are who you are in whatever domain you work. I wish I could tell every woman. I would say this is what the Lean In book got wrong, is the external trappings of what you do is independent of the value that you bring. And maybe it's that same thing of being a bench warmer who is a captain, is that role and value are not the same. So it was the right thing to do. My son got disproportionate focus. He still managed to be an idiot for a few more years. The surprising thing is I probably would have missed my daughter, because she's just such an easygoing, focused kid that had I not made the decision to leave, I might not have had the chance to know this woman in the way I do now. So, and then my son goes off, pursues his life. My daughter goes to college. She's a freshman at the Naval Academy. And I look around, I'm like, I'm only 48. And I asked the CIA if they're hiring, and they let me come back.
And did you come back? Was it like you had never left? Did you have a
No.
sense had the culture? So this was all right. When you take 8 years, and of course we talk about now how fast things are changing. Had things how had things changed? What
Well,
was the
9/11
delta of the
happened.
organization?
Yeah, so 9/11 happened in those 8 years. And that was a big change for our community and for that agency. I don't think the American people understand how profoundly that affected those of us who believed our job was to keep America safe for democracy. So organization throws its lot in to not only never fail again, but to avenge that, right? And so I come back into an agency is now really focused on counterterrorism. I don't think it was difficult to get back into the mission. I think the funniest thing was I'd been kind of on the top of the heap. And in those 8 years, now I was subordinate to people who had been junior to me. And there were a whole lot of people who had no idea who I was. And so they're like, how come this person gets to come in? So you kind of had to establish your bona fides a bit more. Email was introduced in the years I was gone, and that I couldn't understand that why we would ever let something as intrusive as that into our place. but we overcome that. But no, it was easy enough to get into the mission, and I got this great second act, Dennis, that with my first act was doing mostly analysis and technical development. In the second half, I get a chance to get more into operations, do support, cyber, and do more external things. So weirdly, that break brought me into a different place than I had been before.
And what were the kinds of skills where you were able to make a difference? What kinds of skills did you bring to those to the kinds of things you're doing now that you're doing? Are these leadership roles? Are there what are you applying about Sue?
Yeah, so I've been a leader since I got my first, but hierarchically in a leadership role at the CIA and then in the intelligence community since 1988. And that said, I never believed you could lead without understanding the work. So I spent a lot of time learning the craft associated with each of the leadership roles that I have. You can be an organizational leader, but part of leadership is about setting a vision where we're going to go. So I think the same as I brought when I was junior, and kind of what I do my whole life, is I'm pretty good at seeing the future and pretty good at recognizing what needs to change about the current circumstance in order to be able to be effective in that future. And I think as a leader, and then I can rally people to the cause. Yeah. And so I think that's pretty much, even with the gap that I would bring, right? Even in a circumstance where it wasn't my natural discipline, like when I became the director of support at the CIA, and that's all facilities, logistics, HR, IT, all that kind of stuff that you would never think that I would have any ability to lead. It's still about, okay, what does the organization need? Where are we? How does that need to be delivered? How do you keep what is central about it, but translate it into a different way of doing it? And then how do you talk to the humans that you have in order to get them to see not only must they, but they can, right? And leadership is about both those things. We must, in part because that's our responsibility or because that's what's required. And then you can, which says we can understand that and then develop the ability. And so I don't think it's particularly miraculous or magical, but I think there are a set of leadership things that have allowed me to do that in intelligence. And then now, in the 4 years since I've been out, hopefully the same things for companies to understand that they're national security decision makers now, or such a thing. So
exactly. Well, all right, let me just ask you, since I come from an entertainment background, and you can help me to know when I watch a program like The West Wing, since you spent a lot of time in the executive, or Madam Secretary, which we also we have that. What is it that they get right about how the CIA and the executive branch work, or where just because of entertainment that they weren't able to do? What was your sense of that when you watch a program like that?
Most of them get right the complexity of decision making, right? That most of them, they don't always get the nuts and bolts right, but the fact that decision making is complex. Madam Secretary, you see her having these imperatives that need to be solved diplomatically, but she also has her ties back to the CIA. So you're going to blow an operation, do that. How do you do it? And then you see the White House being upset because it's antithetical to a policy. That's right. It is complex. If decision making is one of the hardest things to do, because there's always a leap of certainty. Good decision makers can make that leap small and are still willing to take it. Bad decision makers try and turn it into an equation where there's no uncertainty, so they never make a decision. But the shows usually get that part right. I think what they get, and they have an extrapolation of everyone's particular craft to make it sexier than it actually is. The work of national security, in the words of Fiona Hill in one of her hearings, was just one of the greatest things. This is just backbreaking, ugly work. Like it's not the stuff of the single decision that the president makes. It's a day-to-day work making. And so they kind of miss that. I think the biggest thing that they miss is how responsible government officials feel to the American people. They tend to have more fun with the outliers that are pursuing a particular personal agenda. That has not been my experience over my career. For good or bad, for good decisions, bad decisions, my experience has been that, particularly in the national security domain, the leaders feel responsible to get something right and to not get something wrong. And I don't think that makes for sexy TV, but the good ones, periodically, you'll see that weight. Movie The American President with Annette Bening and Michael Douglas.
Exactly.
There's that scene in the sit room when they're trying to rush him to make a decision about launching an attack, and he says, "Stop!" Someone says this will look very presidential, and he says, "I'm about to do this," and I thought, that's it, right? It's that consequence that I think is too often missed. That people, it's almost their decision making is too glib, and it misses that feeling of responsibility. Now,
I wanted to just, as we're talking now, we're seeing more women in senior leadership at the CIA than we had before, and so I'm going to go into the stereotype for this for my own, but I want to see if I'm at all close or anything. Back when I was growing up, when affirmative action meant I'm a white man, that's affirmative action. I get into all the meetings in this, that my sense is that we were able to succeed because it was a zero-sum game. We had winners and losers. We could make the decision that way. That now the situations are so much more complex and nuanced, that zero sum, this idea and the sense that I bring when you have both men and women at the table, that we can get into the synergistic, the gray areas, and to really to feel better when we have a diverse team at the table than when we have just have a monoculture. And so anyway, that's a generic term. Could you help me sharpen that a little bit into a place from your experience?
Yeah, anyone who doesn't think diversity makes for better decision making is just goofy, right? It just does. You can go scientific, and we can talk about confirmation bias, and when you have too many people with too many of the same experiences, their belief system is too aligned. And so you're more likely to have confirmation bias, because you don't even consider the possibility that something could be other than what it's been. And so to me, it's not just how we look diversity, but how we think diversity in our experiences. And when that can come into a decision making, you're going to be better, particularly in national security or intelligence. It has so much of a foreign component to it, that understanding cultural differences, you're just going to be better for it. And so the more diversity you have in leadership, because leadership so often shapes not only what the decision is, but how the decision-making process goes, I think is unequivocally a good thing. And one of the thoughts is that, yeah, but if they're qualified, I am here to tell you that we do not have any shortage of qualified, diverse people. I'm just saying. So that's just silly. What I think is fair is you still need good decision makers, somebody who is willing, with all this now information that doesn't all align, to say, okay, how do I hear it, put the best option on the table, and decide on that, rather than being flummoxed by too many different views. So I think for the people that say it was easier to come to a decision before, maybe because there were fewer options on the table. But I think we could go back historically and say the decision to commit troops in 1966 to Vietnam was a bad decision, but there were only two decisions on the table, and both of them were bad. And no one said, hey, maybe we should work to have another option. So I do think that focusing on decision-making as a critical skill, and looking to make sure that our institutions are designed for decision-making and designed to create decision makers, is probably something worth focusing on, and probably is lacking a bit as our mission space is expanded, as more people rise more quickly. Do they have the understanding of their responsibility as a decision maker, and is the organization aligned in a way that supports proper decision making? Is probably the better way to think about any gaps that we're seeing than, yeah, we've just got too many opinions. I'm telling you what, if I'm making a decision, I want to hear it all, and then I'll make a decision.
So how do you spend your time now? What are the things that interest you, excite you, or that are grabbing you at this time in Act 3?
Well, I'm trying to figure that one out. I wasn't quite ready to leave, and so I didn't spend 2 years saying, okay, I know I'm going to retire in 2 years, so I had better figure it out. I think what probably excites me the most now are two things. One, helping individuals and companies see that they are actually national security decision makers. And so it would be best if they accepted that role and acted accordingly, right? So a company that doesn't invest in cybersecurity doesn't understand that to our adversaries and competitors, they are the holy grail of America. And their decision to either protect or not is affecting national security. So that's really fun, right? Because it's a different way of thinking about it. And then the other side of that same coin is being a part of this great innovation engine that we have in America, and working with both big companies and small companies to see that we are actually continuing to create those things that are worth protecting, that'll take us places. So I have a lot of fun with that. If you ask me what what I don't have as much time for now, that I probably will at some point in the future, I love teaching. I love teaching. I had a chance to do a bit at Duke and Harvard. It takes a lot to be a good teacher, and so I have a couple other things on my plate, but boy, for two reasons. One, it's lovely to impart the wisdom you've gained. It's even more fun to take stock of what greatness is coming. I mean, the students today, you know, we love, people in my generation love bemoaning, you know, millennials or Gen Zs because they don't fit into the structure we have. Me, when I talk to them, I'm like, holy smokes, we'll be okay. We're going to be okay. If you will serve, we are going to be okay. So that's just a fun thing to do.
And when you know, when we think about this with biology and the history of animals, I see that in the history of machines that went from a rock to a hammer to a loom to the printing press to early computers to AI, that's also that we went from a single cell organism all the way up into that AI is an actual being along this, kingdom. There would be the machine that this is what's happening, because something is very, and this idea of that we're going to control it. I have a feeling we've already let it out of it's already there. It's in our culture, and that we've got something. What are your thoughts on it? How have you experienced it?
So let's see if I can be organized on this thought. Number one is, I do think that we are at a moment of strategic uncertainty, and in zoologic terms, that means where the shape of what's going to emerge is not clear. And I think that is where we are societally right now. There's a great TED talk by a British organizational theorist named Eddie Obeng, who has this, it's probably 10 years old now, called After Midnight. And he said, we all went to bed, and sometime after midnight, the world changed. And when we woke up, it looked the same, but nothing we had done before worked. I think that's where we are. And I think of it as strategic uncertainty. That means we can't count on the shape of the future being the shape of the present. You saw this in animals and development. So it is a consequential moment in the decisions we make now. On AI, I think it's super exciting because it's been around for so long. And I think what's happening right now with this generative AI is really interesting in terms of what it can do. But I think it will neither save the world nor put it into it. It still will come down to what humans decide to do, how we decide to engage it, and shape it. So I think it is, I tend to view it as, oh my God, what are all the things that we will be able to do because of it? I tend to think of it, if we pursue what it can do without fear. But there is a role for assurance, explainability, regulation that needs to come along with it. And we have successfully done this. We always talk about public-private partnership. Actually, the public and private has always worked really pretty well together in America.
We went to the moon, right? Look at all the ancillary things that came out of that because we decided to make that decision.
So I think even with things that are fearsome, and I haven't been to Oppenheimer yet. I need to go because that's, I did duck and cover drills as a little kid, so this is my history. But I think thinking about that, it's why I think that this attack on the government that seems to be in vogue now as though it's malfeasant is really unhelpful. We can tear the government down, but something must replace it because society requires this sort of thing. So when I think about AI, my perfect scenario is let's use the energy we have, but let's get the good government players to leap into the fray with it and say, we're going to do what governments can do well. We can help with the funding of the unsexy stuff of assurance and explainability. We can do some regulating to make sure that it isn't willy-nilly, but do it in a way that doesn't impede the advance, because the advance is going to allow us to do things that we really need and we can't yet envision. Yeah, I can't help myself, Dennis.
It is amazing. Sue, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for the opportunity to get to know you and to learn about you. This has been just a joy for me. I've been excited about it since the first time that you said yes, and I just went, oh, all right, I've caught the car. So now I get a chance to be able to do this and to have some fun while we're at it.
Absolutely a delight, Dennis. And well, one, thanks for honoring me. You know, I'm such a, I've used the word lucky throughout. Always considered it that way. And it continued when you sent a note to me and said, hey, would you like to talk? My fondest dream would be that anyone that listened to this would say, oh my God, if she could do this, I could do this. That there's nothing special about her that isn't available to me.
This episode of Reasonably Spontaneous Conversations has been brought to you in part by In Search of the New Compassionate Male. For more information, go to newcompassionatemale.com.